to episode 7 of The Table, and you may be noticing right away that the best-looking face is missing. So you can, Nick, you should be here, but we decided to go ahead with a smaller cast today, and so I'm here with our friend Mark, who had a really interesting question that we wanted to explore today. So, Mark, why don't you tell people what's on your mind?
Yeah. Something I've been thinking a lot about lately is kind of the biblical way to go about confronting a Christian friend that you might have who's in the wrong, whether it be a continuous kind of sin that they're in, and just kind of ways to bring that up in a biblical way.
Okay, and I'm sure nobody's ever had any kind of conflict with anybody in their life, so this will be exclusively for Mark. Hopefully he can learn something. The rest of you can just enjoy watching him sweat. But actually, the question's great because the principles that hold to that conversation with a Christian friend hold to pretty much every single conversation. The principles, that is, hold to any conversation that we might have. And so I think it's a really great conversation to explore today. Is there anything that comes to mind as you look back on situations where you've had conflicts? Anything come to mind where your best efforts went horribly wrong?
Yeah, I think.
And don't name names. We don't do names on this program. So, but yeah, if you could describe a situation, that'd be great.
Yeah, especially I think the thing at least that comes to mind to me, and I'm sure it's the same for most people, is that kind of you have a friend who might struggle with a certain character flaw, who might be in this, especially a continuous kind of sin that they're in, or a way that they act that doesn't represent the gospel message well, or doesn't represent Christ well, and you kind of try to confront them about it, but because it's so almost deep within their character, or maybe even, especially I find for a lot of kind of kids my age, men my age, is that it's almost like a defense mechanism for them to kind of deflect a personal flaw that's going on. So that's kind of what comes up to mind to me.
Okay. Anything that you have ever tried to fix that specifically that you can think of?
One thing that comes to mind, I think...
Or that someone's done to you.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe...
That's an interesting angle. I can't remember anything particularly from me, but I kind of... One instance comes to mind where I had a friend who would kind of handle a lot of kind of almost, I want to say, like threats in his life, or if he felt like people were challenging his ego, he'd make jokes and he would demean the other person a lot, and that's kind of the way he dealt with his own insecurity for a lot of years. And so kind of trying to talk with him about that was always difficult for me, because I would try to approach him and say like, hey, I think you're channeling your insecurities by making these jokes when I really think there's something deeper going on and I want you to be vulnerable. And he kind of would just kind of shut me out. So I'd want to close that gap with him emotionally, but it wouldn't really happen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and that is a great example, because oftentimes our best intentions go south very quickly, because what we want to say is not received in the spirit that we at least intend it, right? And there's H.K. Smith's book on communication, he has I think it's the first law. Communication isn't only what is said, but also what is heard. And so if I think I'm saying, hey, here's a place where you could grow, but what the person hears is, hey, you're a jerk, and right, that's kind of death of the conversation right there. But another principle that can be really helpful, I think, that to come to, there's a couple of principles that can undergird those kinds of conversations and inform our starting point. First is, in Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, it's a very famous saying, do to others what you want others to do to you, or do unto others in the way that you want them to do it to you. And so that's kind of a good check for us if I'm wanting to talk to somebody I can ask myself, okay, if somebody came to me and started the conversation this way, how would I respond? I find that helps me a lot. Because I'm kind of like, I probably would not be very happy to have this conversation if that was the starting place. Why do you always, that kind of thing. When Barbara and I are doing premarital counseling, kind of our number one rule is never say never and always to somebody. You always leave your clothes on the floor. You never wash the dishes or whatever it is. Like you throw always and never when you're talking to somebody that you want to help. That's pretty much game over right there. Because their mind's immediately going to go to exceptions. Well, what do you mean? I washed the dishes 5 years ago, and you never said thank you. So, when you think about that, when you think about okay, what I'm saying is it going to be heard the way I want it to be heard? That's a good question to ask. A good check. If somebody said it to me, would that be good news to me, or would that be irritating? So those are a couple of principles. The third principle that I think is really helpful is to remember in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul's talking to this very combative group of people, and he says, we've become followers of Jesus that we might be ministers of reconciliation. And that's a really powerful descriptor. If you start with the question, is what I'm about to say to this person going to be conciliatory, reconciling, or is it going to be is it going to add fuel to the fire? Am I asking this to pursue reconciliation, or because I want to justify myself, shame them, call them to account? Those are very different starting points in a conversation. If I think you're wrong and you just need to be fixed, my attitude is gonna be more aggressive and accusatory. That's not going to get a good conversation started. Well, let's think about it. I mean, if I come to you and I say, Mark, every time we get together, it seems like you are always finding excuses for yourself when people try to correct you.
Yeah. It kind of comes off a certain way.
Right?
Yeah.
What does it sound like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you mentioned. It's kind of like using the always language instead of being more specific, or instead of kind of leaving it open to interpretation. But yeah, one thing you kind of hearing you talk brings up, at least for me, is that I think about Jesus and the way that he sometimes would interact with the Pharisees around him. And at least I've found that sometimes his language was often very to the point and very blunt, it seemed at times. I think there's an instance in John where he drops the famous I am, like referring, like almost letting everyone know that he is God himself, in which he told the Pharisees that they're children of the devil. And their response was not always, they weren't very happy with him.
Yeah. And
they sought to kill him.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so I'm trying to, I guess.
And when you are God, you can do that.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
Okay, but what did Jesus say to us? Do unto others, you'd have others do unto you, right? If love your enemies, pray for your enemies, bless your enemies. That's our starting point. Now, that doesn't mean we never have hard conversations, but we want to get we want to start with a reconciling spirit. And we're going to come back to that in a second, but let's keep going. So did you sense judgment in my voice when I started that conversation with you?
I think so.
Yeah.
At least that's what I picked up on. Yeah.
Okay. If a person feels judged, they are not going to be receptive to you. In fact, another thing Jesus said, he says, judge not lest you be, lest you be judged, right? Because he says, the same measure that you use with others is going to be used with you. And I'll tell you, as a parent, that happens all the time. If I say to my kids, well, go clean up your room, and that, your room's a mess, I'm likely to hear, yeah, well, your office is a mess, right? I'm coming at them with judgment, and they can certainly find something in my life that is equally out of sorts, right? And so the idea of starting with a reconciling, as a reconciler, as a minister of reconciliation, means that you're not looking to be proved right, but you're looking to restore the relationship, whether it's your relationship with this person and their relationship with you, or their relationship with God. But you come at it not seeking to chop them off at the knees, but to help figure out, hey, how do we deal with this in a way that gets you back where you wanted to be going? A friend of mine used to call this triangulation. It's like if there's a problem if there's a problem, let's put the problem here. Okay, you and I, you're not receiving correction. You are making defenses, like you were saying. Okay, and then I say, dude, you've got this problem. And you're going to push back and say, no, it's not my problem, it's your problem. Right? No. You're the one who's doing it. Yeah, but you're just judging me. We get into that kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
Well, what if we can put this out there and say, wow, Mark, just feels like our relationship's not working really well. It feels like we're in this place of, I'm feeling frustrated with you, but it seems like you're really frustrated with me. What do you think? What do you think is happening? Now it's not you and I arguing back and forth. And this is why my friend calls it triangulation. It's you and me attacking a problem. We put the problem out there. Now the problem becomes the issue instead of us. And that can be really helpful in a conflict. And that's whether you're talking about a Christian friend or the server at the restaurant that you feel is not treating you right, or a teacher or a student. You can use that in all kinds of situations, because what you're doing is you're diffusing the conflict instead of exacerbating it. Does that?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like using a lot of our language and making it, rather than just, like, it seems like what you're saying is that instead of pinning it on this person as this is your problem to deal with, which leads to that like polarizing argument.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I wish I had thought of that. Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, and so like by using our language, you're showing that you're trying to be there with them to help them work through it, or through, let's say, the problem that you have between you two, rather than dumping blame. It's kind of a sense of witness, in that you're trying to aid them along to better your relationship, and it's coming from a place of care.
Yeah, and I like your our language, because it's also owning that you may have part of it. Sometimes we, clearly, if the guy's out robbing banks, that's a different kind of issue, right? But if it's a communication or a relational kind of conflict, there's probably some stuff on our side that we need to own too.
Yeah.
And that's where putting it out there makes it a lot easier to deal with, because it's not you, it's it, right? So that can be really helpful. But let's say there's a real conflict. This is real too, but let's say there's a real issue that they have, where it's definitely on them. Somebody's being verbally abusive to their spouse or child or something. That's real, right? And that's not between you. That's them. That's where that reconciliation, that minister of reconciliation role is really important. Jesus did talk about that in Matthew 18. He said, if your brother sins against you, go and talk to him alone. And if he listens to you, you've won your brother. Now, implicit in that statement is you go to pursue reconciliation. You don't go to judge. You don't, exclusively. Obviously, you're judging the action, but you're not going to them to highlight that. You're saying, this is not helpful for you. It's not helpful for your relationships, and it's having if we say it's abusive talk to a child, it's having a damaging impact on your child, and they might recognize that, and and then you can say, well, okay, so where's this coming from? Well, I was abused as a kid. This is the way my parents treated me, and I now I realize I'm doing it to them. Okay, you can talk about that. You can pursue a course of healing for that area of their life, right? Or something else that maybe they're on the verge of losing their job, and they're just not handling it well, and they're exploding at their loved ones. You can deal with that. There's all kinds of options. And in my experience, in this dynamic, I will say, I can say pretty confidently that 85 to 90% of the time, when we go to the person in that spirit, that I see something that's broken, and it's not helping you. What can we do to get that fixed? I can say 85 to 90% of the time that will lead to a really significant positive outcome. Not always. And Jesus has suggestions, says, if he does not listen to you, take a couple of other people with you who are aware of this, and go back and have the conversation again. And I have seen that what doesn't happen with the one-on-one very, 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 very often happens with that group conversation. Because it's like, if you come to me and light me up, you come to me with the right spirit and try to help me deal with something that's messed up in my life. I can ignore you, but you come back with Nick, you come back with Chase, you come back with a couple of other people. It's a lot harder for me to ignore that. Yeah. And I will say that leads to solutions in most of the other cases. Jesus says, if that doesn't work, go back again, but this time bring leadership from the church. And so over 40 years of ministry, I have seen that when we do those things, the outcome is overwhelmingly resolved in a positive way. So it's, go one-on-one, pursuing reconciliation, go back with friends. Don't go back with people that don't like this person, okay? You have to go back with friends. because if you're going to have that kind of a conversation, it has to be people that they know love them.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, you go back with leadership. That usually will tip the balances. I don't know. How does that?
Yeah, it brings up another question for me, because I find what I've been finding lately is that if I'm thinking about what someone's been doing or what I've been observing, so we're talking specifically about a behavior we're observing in someone else that they're doing to other people, not necessarily us. Mm-hmm. Sometimes what I find is that I'm picking up on that behavior specifically because I struggle with myself.
Oh, sure.
So before I think about going to confront this person about this particular thing they're doing, I now have a new revelation that I struggle with that too. And so how would realizing that change the dynamic of the conversation you're about to have?
Well, you just quoted Jesus. That's hilarious. Because in Matthew 5, that same place where he says, "Judge not, lest you be judged," mm-hmm. he says, to put it in his terms, in the vernacular, dude, you've got a log in your eye, and you're trying to take a speck of dust out of the other person's eye. Mm-hmm. Take the log out of your eye, then you'll see clearly to be able to take the dust out of the other person's eye, which is what you just said. You need to work on yourself first. Mm-hmm. And I think what Jesus is trying to say there is, if you work on yourself first, you're going to have better understanding of what's going on with the other person. You're also going to have a much more humble attitude. When we recognize our own weaknesses or failures, or places in the past where we've had failures, we just come at it with a lot less arrogance than if we just think, I'm all that, and I've got truth for you. So does that help?
Yeah, that helps frame it. The only thing I'm kind of thinking about after that is, what if, I guess it's kind of a separate question, but I found that at least in my life, like, someone would have approached me not in a harsher way, but kind of saying, hey, if you continue down this path, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble for yourself and you're going to hurt someone. Mm-hmm. How would you deliver kind of bigger news like that? Like, you have to stop or else you're heading towards death, or you have to stop or else you're heading towards something you don't want to go near, and kind of that loving, like, warning.
Yeah, it still needs to, you use the magic word, loving warning.
Loving warning, yeah.
We all have people in our lives that are making those kinds of decisions. And usually, let's take, I have a friend who had a parent who was an addict and kept saying that same message to their parent. And it was not being received. It was being denied. I don't have a problem. I don't, and this friend of mine never gave up, and then just finally said, you're my parent, I love you, however, your addiction is creating risk for family, and we will have to step back from our relationship with you to protect family members. But they did that. Several family members went together, and nothing had worked up to that point. But with the circle of family around them saying, you're becoming a danger to the rest of the family, that led that person to seek healing. And, by God's grace, they're thriving now. And so sometimes we do have to have that hard conversation, but I loved your phrase, loving conversation. When love goes out, if we're trying to do things judgmentally, it's always going to be a train wreck.
Yeah.
Maybe that's kind of the bottom line. When we really have the best in our heart for the other person, more than likely it's going to eventually end well. And it may not end well at first. You know, they can, they may not accept the counsel at first, but the persistence, when they hit that wall, and they realize, okay, what I've been doing isn't working, then they'll know, they'll be able to say, Mark has been telling me this for a long time. Maybe I need to have that conversation again. And you know, that's where patience comes in. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that helps. I liked how you talked about your friend who, you know, whose parent had this addiction, and then they said we might have to create space with you in order for this to like get resolved and protect ourselves. Is that something that's like, let's say you try to approach someone and the original confrontation, if you want to call it, doesn't go well and the behavior continues. Is there ever a time to pull away for the sake of protecting oneself?
Yeah. And actually that's the fourth step. Jesus says, you know, if you go to your brother alone, and if you listen, you've won your brother. If not, you go back 2 or 3, so that every word can be affirmed in the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses. So, and if not, take it to the church, go to leadership. And if not, create space and give them time, you know, to reflect. So yeah, that can happen. And but again, you do it out of love for the person. It's not to punish. It's to give them a chance to respond, right? So I think that's probably the hardest thing for us when somebody is hurting themselves or hurting us or hurting others. We just kind of want to go in there like, you know, Crime Stoppers. You know, we're gonna put an end to this thing, but it just doesn't work. It works in the movies, you know, does not work in real life. Loving, persistent, reconciling spirits will get much more done than the guys with karate and, you know, submachine guns. It's just the way it works in real life. So, well, we should probably tie it up, but man, Mark, this was good stuff. Thank you for bringing that question today. And you know, if you want to pursue that question further, if there's someone in your life that you're trying to figure out how to deal with, you can always contact us at our email address, the info at northcountyproject.org. We'd be happy to answer that. And if you have any questions that you would like to talk with us, I say us because Nick's here in spirit. You just can't see him. We would love to have you join us here at the table. So thank you, and God bless.